My name's Roger Geronimo, and I'm originally from the New York area, Connecticut and New York City. And professionally, I've been a corporate executive and a teacher of finance, economics, and law for about 25, 35 years. I have a PhD in finance and economics. For 8 years, I served as an economic advisor to Ronald Reagan. Mr. Reagan nominated me to be Undersecretary of the Treasury in 1985, which was quite an honor. And then at the age of 40, I suddenly got a desire to sing. I took some lessons at a local performing arts studio in Milford, Connecticut, and I'm now 20 years later an opera singer. I remember it very well. It was September of 2004. I was on US 1 in St. Augustine. I was sitting at a stoplight and just watching the cars make their turn, and out of nowhere I was rear-ended. I didn't hear a horn. I didn't know it was coming. It was dusk, a little bit rain, and the young man who hit me did not see me in front of him, so he hit me at about 50 to 55 miles an hour and just totaled my Toyota RAV that I had at the time. I don't remember much, to be honest with you, because of the accident. I do remember the young man coming over to me and asking me if I was okay. And as I looked over, he had a neck brace on and one arm in a sling. And I said to myself, this is somebody that shouldn't have been driving a car that day. And then I was rushed to the hospital. And when I went back a few days later to look at the RAV, I found my baseball cap was in the back seat, and the headrests were actually both came right off of the car during the impact. And I was in the hospital overnight for observation and x-rays. Of course, the pain is just severe. I was bedridden for at least 2 or 3 days. I had back injuries. I had a shoulder and neck injury, and the shoulder injury actually had to be operated on about a year later. And they still continue today, as with many accidents. The back is still a problem, but that'll always be there. It's just part of what happens when you're rear-ended. The young man did not have any insurance, I found out from the police officers. And I said to my wife, I said, how are we going to pay for all these medical bills that I'm going to have? And she said, well, I used to be a waitress at a local restaurant in Jacksonville. And I used to wait on this guy, Eddie Farah, and he was really, really nice. And she said, yeah, you ought to give him a call. He may even remember me. Well, I was on the computer, and I just sent an email to Mr. Farah. And much to my surprise, and I couldn't believe this, within an hour, one of his representatives contacted me and said, how about we meet this afternoon and we'll discuss your case. And I couldn't believe the service. It was that same day, and the gentleman took all the information down. We talked about the accident, the injuries, the fact that I would have to sue my own insurance company because of the no-fault laws here in Florida. By the next morning, believe it or not, we got a call from one of Mr. Farah's expert attorneys, and they had agreed to take the case. And it was really within a 12-hour to 18-hour window that they agreed to take my case on a contingency basis. And I've never seen service like that anywhere from a law office in all my years in business. When you go with a big law firm, you think that you're just going to be a number. And in actuality, when the attorney called me from the law offices of Farah and Farah, he said, let's meet the next day. And we went over the entire case in about an hour, hour and a half in the office here in St. Augustine, so I did not even have to drive to Jacksonville. And I met the attorney who had tremendous experience. And what I liked about the attorney is that he had 16 years experience working on the other side. So he had worked for a large insurance company for 16 years and then had worked another 8 to 10 years here in the law offices of Farah and Farah. Very impressive with that kind of experience. And they went to work on the case right away. What was good for myself and the family was that it was a contingency basis. There was absolutely no out-of-pocket expense, and I mean not a nickel. The service was unbelievable in that they got all the bills together. They would call the the physical therapist, for example, and they would get all those bills. I didn't have to do any of that. And the best thing would happen, see, we didn't have insurance. I'm self-employed. And I was still able to get complete medical treatment from the best doctors and eventually from the hospital, because I required surgery, through the letters of protection that were given to the certain medical providers that Farah and Farah have that they work with, and they were all excellent. So there was no out-of-pocket and none of the stress of who am I going to go see, I can't pay the doctor, how am I going to pay for these bills? So the letter of protection was just critical for us and the family, and they took care of all that. The attorney gave me his cell number, and believe it or not, when I called my attorney at Farah and Farah, he would call me back or answer the phone. Again, I've never had that type of service in all my years in business, where litigation is very, very common. And the attorney calls you right back. He would email me to update me. He would ask me questions by email. And the responses were, he had his own internal policy that he would get back to me within 24 hours, and I never even had to wait that long. It was incredible. Even when he was in trial and couldn't be accessible, one of his associates, paralegal, would call me back and give me updates. Updates were just about weekly, or anytime I had a question. It's like they had been going through the accident, the pain, the suffering, the legal issues themselves. They put themselves in my shoes and had much sympathy for me, and everything was worked out so professionally and so conveniently that they wanted to keep the level of stress at an absolute minimum. The level of respect was just amazing. It was the old adage, put the customer first, and I was put first as if I was their only client, and that's how I felt. The insurance company was very, very tough, I must admit. That surprised me as a customer for almost 30 years. They tried to use my Parkinson's disease as reasons for a lot of these injuries. They even went to a book that I wrote and took quotes out of the book about my Parkinson's disease. And, you know, that's why I had a bad back, and that was part of the reason my shoulder hurt. But in the end, it really wasn't because of the surgery and the medical reports. What also surprised me was that when we went through the mediation process, which is like a mini trial in front of an administrative judge, the mediator said in all of his years of doing these mediations that the $70,000 I was asking for was really ridiculous. The mediation closed and there was no settlement. And that was very, very disappointing. The insurance company was very, very tough. They had originally offered us $20,000 at the beginning of the mediation. We got them up to 50 4 hours later, but we wanted 70. We had a trial date, which was only, I think, 2 months down the road. And I don't know the magic that he did when he spoke to the insurance company, but we were set. We had the date ready to go, and everything was in place, which to me was amazing ahead of time. He had the witness list. We knew the questions. We had the reports that we needed. We could have gone to trial that day. That's how prepared they were. The next step was already planned and ready to go. 2 days later, my attorney from Farah and Farah calls me up and said, "We're done." They called me. We've settled for $70,000. 2 days ago, the mediator said that was impossible. 2 days later, we have our figure and the case is settled. And it was just amazing how well the process went, but that's because of the determination and the experience and knowledge of the attorneys that Farah and Farah have working for them. All the bills were paid. I didn't have any collection calls. My pain, my surgeries were covered. My family was taken care of. I would have to say, out of all the businesses that I've dealt with in my life, they have the best service of anybody. And I'm talking about car dealerships, the grocery store, the local shoemaker, anybody. It's absolutely phenomenal. I can't tell you how well they treated me. My wife would call. They'd call back. first name basis. Eddie's called me a dozen times. How many times does the CEO of any firm, I don't care whether it's a local store or a major corporation, call you and ask how you're doing? And I was treated so well, like I meant something. And you have to remember, they took the risk. There was no money out of my pocket. If we lost, they didn't get a penny. Well, you know, you never know when these things are going to happen. And they happen overnight, so suddenly, and you need help. And it's a terrible position to be in when you can't get help with things like medical expenses and the pain and suffering that you're going through. And if anybody ever needs an assistance from a law firm, don't go through the yellow pages, forget the advertisements on TV, except for Farah and Farah. They are the best.